to the recording. So I'm just going to turn it over to Susana Valdez.
Good morning, afternoon, and thank you for joining us. As Marcus mentioned, my name is Susana Valdez, and I am also with the National Youth Leadership Council, where I serve as the Chief Learning Officer, and I'd like to welcome you to District Profiles of Service Learning, and you can see on your screen that this was the blurb that was on the GSN about it. So we've been working with districts around the country to implement service learning so that we improve engagement and affect academic mastery for students. And so ultimately, to decide for yourselves if service learning is right for you, or in what ways might service learning be right for you. So you can see now your webinar goals based on the blurb that was outlined in the GSN introducing this webinar. These are the pieces that we pulled, but recognizing that you might have another goal. So if you could, please, in the chat box on the right, down at the bottom, write, my goal is district initiatives, or my goal is student engagement, academic mastery, the right fit, or some other personal goal. And if you've got more than one, feel free to write as many of your webinar goals as you would like. We will do our best to address all of your goals. So while you are typing in the bottom right-hand corner in the chat box what your goals are for this webinar, I'd like to introduce our guests today. So as I mentioned, the National Youth Leadership Council works across the nation with numerous districts. And by far, our two closest partners are the Mounds View Public Schools and the Guilford County Schools in Minnesota and in North Carolina. So I'd like to introduce Greg Herter first. I'll start there. The Service Learning Coordinator for the Mounds View Public Schools for the past 3 years. He was in the classroom 15 years before that and worked with high-need students on both ends of performance spectrum in the gifted and talented arena, as well as the at-risk components. And in Minnesota, Mounds View was the first district to offer an early college program at the high school and a STEAM initiative at all the middle schools. They are also the first in the state to introduce an equity promise in their mission and vision, and Greg will talk a little bit more to that point as he's presenting. And finally, the first district to provide free ACT testing for all its students. So the goal is absolutely to assure that students have a leg up in a college and career pathway. Greg states that the motivation he has for doing this work and why he focuses on service learning is because of concerns that he had with social justice and equity, and a firm belief in civic proficiency-focused education. Greg has a BA from Kalamazoo and a master's from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So North Carolina's in the house. He is a certified instructional coach from the University of Kansas, and NYLC has a publication called Getting Started in Service Learning, and Greg was one of the co-authors, editors of that publication with us. Now I'll introduce Yvonne Foster, who is a native of Wilmington, North Carolina. Yvonne received her bachelor's in business education and a master's in education and reading from North Carolina A&T State University. She's worked with the Guilford County Schools for 9 years, serving as an instructional technology facilitator, a C&T educator, and currently she is the coordinator of character development and service learning. Her passion for education contributes to her leadership on the North Carolina Service Learning Coalition as the professional development chair and a board member for the Food Corps of North Carolina State and at A&T State University. As the coordinator of character development and service learning, Yvonne has helped to lead Guilford County Schools to achieve the Character Education Partnership State and National District of Character Award. So, as we're, I'll be passing the baton over to Greg here in just a minute, but I did want to make a note that some of these, some of your all goals are to integrate service learning within the curriculum and to get your schools to expand their service learning programming. One goal is to work with existing schools to institutionalize service learning, so that actually seems like a similar goal to integrating it and expanding it within the school or within the district. One says to improve student leadership, and certainly student leadership vis-a-vis service learning is a big component, and I'm sure Greg will speak to this in terms of civic participation, as will Yvonne as she chats with you. One goal is to, as a global education outreach coordinator, to deepen the support for service learning in the Milwaukee Public School District, so that student engagement for underserved students in a large urban school district has more visibility. A social service agency in New York City with a service learning department, they want to find new partnerships with schools in Manhattan. And we do have some ways that we'll share with you about joining our collaborative online network of service learning professionals. So that will be hopefully, Judith, an option for you. And finally, service learning coordinator, community service coordinator for 2 high schools in a large district, integrate service learning in a more effective way. So maybe also for Samantha, but for others, what is the pathway from community service to service learning, and what does that look like? So I'm going to turn this over to Greg, and as I'm doing that, if you wouldn't mind, in the bottom right-hand corner in the chat box, pick one of these 4 that best describes who you are and how you work with service learning, so that we know sort of what level of expertise and what might be of interest to you. So it's new to me as a 1. I use it in my classroom as a 2. We use it school-wide, or 3, or 4, the district is using it in every building. If you want to put a 5, for those of you that are not in the classroom, you're not in a district, and you're supporting those kinds of initiatives, then just type into the chat box. The question was, is there a polling tool? I'd say just in the chat box, type a 1 for new, 2 for in my classroom, etc. And if you have a 5, can you please tell us what your 5 is, so that we know what your focus point is. And I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be here today. Glad to be invited. As you hear these things, if there are things you want to follow up with me later, information's at the end of this. You're also going to hear a lot of things that are parallel to what's going on in Guilford. A lot of things that are parallel to the things that Yvonne will be talking about. And that's not accidental. That's not synchronicity. I've had connection with Guilford since before I had my current position through NYLC and the work they were doing. And I'll be the first to say we borrow freely from those guys. As far as I'm concerned, they're kind of the gold standard nationally. So, but we do start from different places, Minnesota and North Carolina, in terms of the institutions that we're working with and the cultures. For us, getting a plan to put service learning a little bit more intentionally to work in the district comes from the question that you see in front of you, which is what are the biggest barriers to adoption. And I'll expand on that in a second. We're a very typical district in Minnesota, and that's relevant because of how it affects what we're doing and the approach that we're taking. What I mean by typical is we're kind of a mid-sized suburban district, and what that means in Minnesota is that we are historically white, middle class, and upper class, and highly performing. So we deal with the issue, two issues in particular. One is the very good is the enemy of great paradigm. People are content to kind of sit on our history. And the other piece, too, is kind of isolation from some of the issues that go on around the country and the idea that philanthropy is the be-all and end-all of service and civic involvement. So those are kind of the two things that we're dealing with. As Susanna said, we got ahead of this in our district, though. The big impetus for this is our demographics started changing very quickly. Again, we're very typical of suburban districts in that way. But we got ahead of it with the equity promise, and basically says very publicly that we're not going to allow arbitrary things to determine our student success or access to opportunity. We're just not going to have it. And you're not going to be able to see it in data by next year. There won't be any trends that you can identify. That affected how we go about deploying different initiatives in the district. And Marcus, can you pop back a second? In that we do things across the district. We don't subscribe to a magnet school kind of model for different opportunities or anything. We do everything across the board. At our elementary schools, we're doing positive behavior intervention strategies, which is, most of you probably will be familiar with that. It's a system that tries to link, very rudimentary civic behaviors to academic achievement. We do that in all our middle schools. Our elementary schools. Our middle schools are all STEAM schools. That's science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math. It's very hands-on, very inquiry-based education. The idea of that is to prepare them better for high school. That's where we've been doing a lot of the work with NYLC because the two things are pretty much kissing cousins. All of our high schools have early college, are in the process of adapting to that, so all of our students will have the opportunity to get an associate's degree for free by the time they graduate high school. But again, it's across the district. Nobody's counted out. We're just not going to have that. So another way that we're typical is that we had a lot of stuff on the plate before we started thinking about how service learning could help impact these different initiatives. And one of the biggest barriers you always get everywhere are folks that say, hey, we're too busy, we can't afford to do another separate thing. So our solution to that is a get in where you fit in kind of strategy. We want to embed service learning within those initiatives, not as a separate initiative or a separate piece. We're using a train the trainers kind of structure to try and spread expertise throughout the district. And that's something you'll see in Yvonne's work as well with Guilford. And we work closely with the curriculum department. The first thing I did, and again, we're typical in this way too, we're a district that's had service learning practice going on, different levels of quality over the years, but mostly it's been community service and it's been a voluntary thing, and you kind of had the all-stars doing their work, but you weren't able to get training out to everyone. And that's because it was kind of seen as something elective, something different, something special. So the first thing I did when I got on board was to create some documents that clearly aligned where service learning would support our entire district strategic plan, point by point. And that document was able to really get me a lot of buy-in and purchase from the district administration, the school board, and our curriculum department. Yvonne will talk about that as well and the way they've gone about doing that in North Carolina. But working closely with the curriculum department gives it an impress of legitimacy for people who took it kind of casually before. So that was a big first step for us. Okay. So what we are doing, we're training the leadership teams. We're training the leadership teams at the schools and the STEAM teams and the different committees that do the different initiative work and support, getting them to look at service learning as another framework through which to really improve what they're already doing, as a way of enhancing it, as a way of protecting against some of the negative excesses that sometimes can happen. I'll give you an example with STEAM education. STEAM education done poorly is just hypothetical project-based. STEAM that lives up to its promise involves really strong community connections and partnerships and a lot of attention to student voice and a partnership kind of relationship with kids. And those of you that are familiar with the service learning standards can see automatically where those things line up. It's a way to help it be more. So that's kind of where we're going at this. Same thing with PBIS. At our high school level, we're not doing anything with a curriculum per se. We don't necessarily feel that that's appropriate at this point because of the nature of the early college and what the staff has to deal with to really get their hands around excuse me, their new practice. But where we do see it playing a part is as a complementary piece to early college ideas through enhancing student leadership opportunities and extracurriculars at the high school level. The idea of early college is don't prepare to do something later, do it now. Your best preparation is to actually do the work rather than getting ready to do the work. We're trying to embrace the same kind of operation and the same kind of philosophy with our extracurricular leadership pieces, which is we're not training kids to do things great at the college level. We want them to commit now, and we think that's a very big 21st century proficiency opportunity that they need to have. A couple of examples of the kind of things we're doing here in these pictures. We're really trying to focus our students on service within the district. Again, being a suburb, oftentimes there are social issues or community problems that go invisible. They're under the radar. So we're trying to refocus our students, which have a tendency to do service elsewhere outside the community, back within the school community where there are needs regarding achievement gap, regarding student leadership development. The first picture is a group of high school students that were in a college prep or college fundamentals type course, kids who were on the bubble as to whether they thought they could go to college or not, working with the student council from one of our elementary schools, which is made up of all at-risk students. And they helped them work together to create a anti-bullying campaign that also touched on some of the things that they did in PBIS. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing more and more of when we're hoping to encourage. The other is a picture from one of our elementary schools that use service learning as a way to assess how well kids are doing in extending PBIS outside of the classroom, and also as an assessment opportunity for the curricular pieces that they're doing at the second grade level. And those are just two examples. A third shows how we've woven this into the curriculum. And one of our middle schools, as part of the STEAM project, pretty much created and had certified a school forest, and this was all done really on student energy. So, student initiative. Okay, so that's a really good example, and that School Forest is also serving as a platform for other district service initiatives, bringing kids together from the different grade levels around issues of organic farming and healthy food as we move into the future here. Last bit, our approach is really, in some ways, really simple. Legitimize service learning, quality service learning practice with your administration, get your curricular support. And then when it comes to getting people on board, it really comes down to two things. Teachers will adopt and try out new pedagogies when they feel that it's easy to get their head around the instructional method, where they can understand it easily, and they're able to see some strong results within context right from the start. If it's hard for them to understand and it's hard for them to implement, they'll shy away from it. And that's really the guiding focus of where we're going. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask Greg about pieces that he's been sharing, please put them in the chat box. We will have time for questions at the end. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Yvonne Foster, who is down in Greensboro, North Carolina. So welcome, Yvonne.
Thanks, Susanna. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And as mentioned previously, we're always welcome to questions, so hopefully I'll be able to address some of the areas of concern that you all have for this particular webinar. Just to give you a preface of Guilford County Schools, we are a very large, diverse urban school district. We have 126 schools with about 72,000 students overall, and there are like 95 countries that are represented in our school district. And with that, we have established a character development initiative which our superintendent, Maurice Green, brought into our school district when he came back in 2009. And through that, the strategic plan was developed, which focused on a particular area, which is Area 5 here, focused on safe schools and character development. And back in 2010, the focus was figuring out how do we increase character education and routine instruction, identifying district-wide student services that how will educate the whole child and support character development, going into recognizing the work of our school staff, as well as providing teachers with effective strategies for addressing student behavior, classroom management, and school safety. And looking at those particular strategies, one thing that was established through the Character Development Initiative project manager, Brenda Elliott, who was also the executive director for student services at the time, that service learning is a great guiding tool to effectively impact those 4 particular strategies from the strategic plan of 2010. And so now we have gotten to this place where we've increased, we've been able to really examine our work, and now in our strategic plan of 2016, we're focusing on integrating character education, service learning, and civic education within Common Core now, really trying to make sure that we have those curriculum connections. Also identifying ways to increase character development opportunities and service learning in after and non-school hours. And the third, expanding recognition of staff and students in our school district. So when you look at how large we are, I am the coordinator for character development and service learning, and we have a nice small team in our district, which consists of 3 character development coaches and a part-time office support personnel, because as I go into this presentation, you'll see that over the past 4 years, the integration of service learning and character development in our school district has truly expanded, and it's expanded based upon our youth engagement as well as teacher interest. And so moving on, one thing that really kind of helped to institutionalize our work in Guilford County was the Student Citizen Act of 2011, which was established in 2001, which was established in the fall of 2001. The Student Citizen Act was passed by the NC State Legislature, and this act required local Board of Education to develop and implement character education instruction with local community input. And so, again, this helps to institutionalize their work in order to have the funding at the time. There was funding through North Carolina for increasing character education, and so we were able to jump on that particular grant. And then once we were able to establish a strong program, the school district itself decided to as well continue to fund our department. Now, moving forward, we have established a Guilford County Schools High School Service Learning Program, which focuses on grades 9 through 12. Our integration of service learning does go from K to 12. However, we have highlighted a particular recognition program for our high school students that decide to dedicate a specific amount of hours into service learning, whether it's serving in their community or serving in school. And so with that, we have established a service learning diploma where students who engage in at least 250 hours over the course of their 4 years in high school can receive the service learning diploma as well as the service learning cord for their graduation regalia. The students who are able to only obtain about 100 hours in service learning over the course of their 4 years also receive recognition through the Service Learning Exemplary Award. And both groups of students that obtain these recognitions, at the end of the school year, we have been afforded from our business community and our business partners to host an event called Cool to Serve, where we're able to recognize and pretty much, you know, do the celebratory part of service learning. You know, students have engaged and put in so many hours over the course of 4 years, so now is the time to celebrate and recognize them for their good work. And again, through business donations, we've been able to give away Apple products, and as well as one of the students who've obtained the service learning diploma are able to possibly receive a new car. So that's like one of the other portions of our celebration at the end of the school year. Now with that, we are now in our 4th year of the program, and so we're looking at approximately about 3,114 students that have graduated or that will graduate, including this class of 2014 that will graduate with one of the 2 recognitions. And so in that, we have Noble Hour to help support our work in tracking those hours. You know, when you think about how large a district is and being able to tally up the information and really review to verify our students truly engaged in service learning, we have the character development team to help with the actual documentation purposes. However, as far as tracking of the hours, Noble Hour has been a great support in that effort. And so in gaining these particular service learning hours, students can gain them either through a class or club, in which when they engage in a class or club within the school, the teachers actually complete a teacher documentation form which covers, you know, the 8 quality standards of practice, as well as some of IPART, and also actually goes over IPART, so we're able to really identify curriculum connections and the student process itself from the teacher standpoint. And then the students take the initiative and responsibility to enter their own hours into Noble Hour. Whereas we also have students who go into the community and engage in service learning independently. And when they do this, in order to document to verify if it's truly service learning versus volunteering, we have our students complete a service learning approval form, which, you know, on the service learning approval form, it goes through, again, the IPART, the investigation, preparation, plan, and action, and reflection, and demonstration. And so in that, students are able to identify connections of what they're giving in service to curriculum areas that they've learned within the school setting. They're making connections with character education. They're making connections to civic engagement as well. So that helps to support the validity of our program. And so with Noble Hour, as you can see on the screen there, over the course of the past 4 years of having our program, we've equated 690,000 hours, which, again, through Noble Hour, we're able to identify the economic impact, which has been $15.2 million. And so this is a snapshot of students in grades 9 through 12 for the past 4 years. Now, where we are, we're definitely having to prepare the troops that are in the trenches. So we do, again, have a great character development team that supports the district. However, you know, we can't do that alone, working with 126 schools. And so with that, each of the coaches are assigned to a grade level, a level. So you have an elementary school-based character development coach, middle school, and high school coach. And even in that, we still need additional assistance with the level of work to really make sure that people and our youth are actually engaged in service learning. And so for the past 4 years, we've also been able to host a summer service learning institute for teachers that are interested in using service learning as an instructional strategy. and NYLC has come to lead a lot of these trainings over the past few years, and then of course with their support, we as the character development team have been able to also train our teachers ourselves over the course of these 4 years. And in turn, we've also been able to have those teachers that are attending these trainings go back to their schools and train colleagues that were unable to attend the training but have an interest in service learning. So that actually helps us on in the school level. And so then we're looking at professional development for our instructional leaders. You know, this is integrating service learning is district-wide has to come from, you know, every area that can be connected to service learning. And so we work with our principals by providing monthly updates to them as far as where, how service learning is being integrated into their schools. And the data that we collect from their teachers, we provide that so that they all can see what's happening across the district. We also offer summer opportunities for our principals and district staff to go out and give service in the community. And they're actually led through many service learning projects by one of the, which we call service learning teacher leaders who have been trained at the Summer Service Learning Institute. They actually facilitate those many service learning opportunities for our district staff during the summertime. So they're actually able to now not just hear about what's going on and maybe see it through observations, but they're actually able to go through it themselves to see how service learning truly impacts our youth and how they learn in school. The other area that we focus on is curriculum and instruction staff. As Greg mentioned, you know, you really have to make sure that you're making that solid connection with the curriculum and instruction department of your particular school district or even of your school, you know, working with curriculum facilitators, because that helps to sustain our work with service learning as actual teaching modality and not just something else in addition to, which a lot of times can be looked upon as. And so this particular summer, which we've done actually over the past couple of summers, was to also develop lesson plans. So we've been able to post a lot of our lesson plans on the GSN, on the Generator School Network. NYLC came down as well to support us in being able to make curriculum connections and identify, you know, some high-quality service learning projects to post on the GSN. And so since then, we've been continuing that work as well. And this summer, we're becoming more focused. So one thing we're, you know, with the switch over to Common Core now, we're really trying to identify where are some strong, easy fits for service learning in Common Core standards and essential standards. But again, our focus right now is Common Core, and we're being very intentional about focusing on the ELA area, K-12 of Common Core. And so in that, we have a team of ELA teachers, which is English Language Arts teachers that are coming K-12 this current summer, who will focus on their particular content and identify some great service learning connections so that we can continue the momentum with having the curriculum integration with service learning. Our next area that we really got to make sure that we have support from our youth. You know, they are the heart of this program, and so in that, you know, we train our teachers, we train our staff in our district, but we also focus on our youth and provide annual service learning trainings for them. And so once a high school student enters in and goes through the 2 days, the 1 day, it's typically on a Saturday, they go through 1 full day of a service learning ambassador training, where they gain information about the ins and outs and basics of service learning, and then they learn how to become advocates at their school. They gain a passion for service learning, and they take all of what they have and take it back to their schools in order to support their peers in understanding service learning. Specifically for the high school service learning program that we have, since there's so many high school students that are interested in this program now. And those students also help in documenting or it's helping to teach and train their peers on how to actually document their hours in Noble Hour, as well as completing their service learning approval form. And so some of the best practices that we have with our youth are allowing them to have teams at their schools. As I mentioned, you know, we've trained our students over the past 3 years, And this past summer, we took a group of students, 4 students, to NYLT, which NYLT helps to support. And so through that particular training, they were able to really focus on the achievement gap. But that also stemmed a great opportunity for us to identify, how can we continue to build student teams within the school to support one another on providing trainings for their peers. And one thing that, we always say as educators is, youth listen to youth. And so that's one of the great areas and our strongest points in this particular program that we're having our youth train so that they can really train and support their peers and engaging and giving back into their community as well as their school. And we also allow our youth to have some leadership roles. So we take some of the high school students that have gone through the training to participate in the Service Learning Youth Council. And so those that participate on the Service Learning Youth Council represent the entire district. They identify grant opportunities. They've written up a couple of grant opportunities to support some of the work for district-wide service learning projects. But we're also looking at how can we have our youth council to support individual schools now too. Because of course, we have about 28 high schools and we don't have representation from all of our high schools. However, we have 18 of the 28 high schools represented on the youth council. And so in that, this youth identified, the issue of how can we get other youth at other schools connected. And so again, it's allowing the youth to have their voice heard and going out to put action within their school community. So this has been an exciting journey along the way. And so it's sustaining the momentum. One of the things that's really important is monitoring the quality of work, ensuring that it is, again, truly service learning and not just volunteering or community service. Sustaining the professional development for our service learning teacher leaders, which is the SLTL as you see on the screen here. And we host monthly teach and learns where we focus on particular standards or we look at IPARD. We also bring in teachers who are using and practicing high quality service learning instruction in their classroom to help lead some of these trainings as well, so they're not always hearing it just from us. Another thing is we do the monthly mailings where we provide updates about different service learning opportunities, whether it be through a grant or whether it be a great webinar that's coming through NYLC or some information from YSA. And we also look at how we can use NYLC's LIFT and GSN to continue some of the work with our professional development area. We do host monthly trainings for our youth as well so that we can keep them engaged and connected. We provide, as I mentioned earlier, quarterly updates from schools to regional offices within our school district so that everyone, from the Board of Education all the way through all of those that are in our school buildings are understanding what impact service learning has on our youth and our schools as well as our community. And as I mentioned earlier, we also do the quarterly presentations to principals and curriculum facilitators. Some of the best practices I just like to celebrate and highlight is through our ACES program. And our ACES program is an after-school enrichment services for elementary students. And so we've done some work with Kathy Berger-Kay to develop after-school lessons that connect the curriculum, character education, civic engagement, as well, with service learning. So, even after school, again, trying to tap into our strategic plan of 2016, we are infusing a nice put-together curriculum that Kathy helped to support, and she comes as well to do some trainings with us throughout the school year periodically. So we're definitely on the move, and we're excited because of the support that we've had through NYLC. And so I thank you all for your time, and let us know how I guess I can help you any further.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. So feel free to continue to send questions, and there are a handful of questions in here that I was hoping we could maybe address. I'm going to give most of these a shot directly and then maybe point you in the direction one-on-one back to either Greg or to Yvonne if you have a particular or specific question personally from you to them. So one of the questions was, how do you make service learning easier for teachers? And I think from both what Greg and Yvonne was saying, the professional development is key in there, as well as having ongoing mentors, whether they're teacher leaders. At Mounds View, they have also instructional leaders at the district level. Obviously, they've got Greg. They have an entire team down in Guilford that includes the director of that department, Yvonne, their regional team mentors, and the support of the administrative person who's there. But they also lean on each other so that the youth train other youth, so that teachers who go to the trainings, whether NYLC provides them or through some other mechanism, that is available across schools and across the district. One of the questions was about middle school language arts examples. I will say that personally, we've done student voice through poetry at the middle school, but for example, the video clip that Greg shared, where language arts is included for that school forest project, where students need to advocate for as a part of an appeal to the school board of them having a school forest. So I would say for ELA, you can certainly do service learning focused and directly in the language arts in the middle school, but you can also infuse ELA across the curriculum, which, as Yvonne is mentioning about Common Core, it's one of the critical requirements of the Common Core. The other thing is, on this last screen, you'll see gsn.nylc.org. If you are not a member of the GSN, we invite you to join. It is a free online collaborative across thousands of districts and states, and if you can search by grade level, by subject, etc., and you will get other examples of where ELA at the middle school or elsewhere can be embedded into service learning. There are a couple of questions about documents for best practice, and again, you'll find many of these on the GSN. You can also find them on the NYLC website, which you can either Google for the National Youth Leadership Council or www.nylc.org. And I will say that probably the two documents that we use most often, that Mounds View and Guilford both use, are the Standards for Quality Practice, the K-12 Service Learning Standards for Quality Practice, as well as the documents that support the student experience or the IPARD cycle. There was a question about lack of structure that overwhelms teachers, and I'm actually going to turn this over to Greg to respond.
Some of this has to do with the nature of your instructional models at different schools, and it's a good question for me. Again, back to the good is the enemy of great. Part of the legacy in Mounds View and the way that we teach up there really has been, they've really done mostly traditional pedagogy for a very long time because they haven't had to do anything else. They haven't had to go forward. So you're kind of used to having that control. The other piece that I think impacts that is the pressure of delivering standards and scope and sequence, which, depending on where you are in the country, can be a really stress-inducing thing. The argument I make about that, though, is, number one, do it in a small way. Scale and scope is a big part of getting your hands around this technique, and it's okay to start small. I think some folks feel that if you're going to do service learning, it has to be this big, ambitious, giant, amazing, they make movies about it kind of project. It doesn't. A small project that's very successful in meeting both the academic standards and the service learning standards is going to do more for your teachers and more for your kids than an ambitious project that gets away from you. So it's okay to be humble and just take it slow. The other piece that I try to get across to them, too, when it comes to that lack of structure and not feeling like you have control of your classroom, I relate it back to formative assessment. The goal of formative assessment is we want kids to be formatively assessing their own work so that when they get stuff back, they're actually going through it and looking for those mistakes as learning opportunities. We want to empower kids through their voice, through their own formative perspective on their work to really take control of their own education. So that's a big piece I make too. It's like, you know, the whole goal is to turn this over to kids to do it on their own. That's the goal of everything we do, is for them to really take this on and make it part of their lives. So even in a small way, it's worth doing that at different opportunities throughout the school year. And you're just going to have to get used to it because it's not the 1960s anymore.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And so for that specific question about structure, et cetera, also certainly feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can include Yvonne and Greg in an ongoing conversation amongst us with anybody that wants to join that conversation. So just reach out to me directly. You can find my email address on the MYLC website, and Marcus will also type it into the chat box for you. There are several questions about sharing forms, planning tools, project development, etc. Several of the forms I think you're referring to are Noble Hour forms. So for those, I'm going to ask you to reach back out directly to Yvonne or to Greg, because Noble Hour is a paid service, and you would need to subscribe to Noble Hour, who my understanding is their fees are actually just going up. There are other resources that you can also look for that do tracking of hours, and a lot of during the setup, you determine, are they service learning hours, are they service hours, what gets an hour, how many, what are the touch points for students. So a lot of this is behind the scenes before a student ever gets into the system. How do you want to set it up? So if you want to use Noble Hour in particular, you can Google them, you can reach out to Greg, Yvonne, they can share with you more of their experience. And both Greg's email address and Yvonne's email address are in the chat box. The last thing I want to say, and then I'm going to turn it over to Yvonne, is we are building, because graciously State Farm is funding improvements to the GSN this year, and two of the improvements are integrating badges so that it attracts youth, but also those of us that are motivated by those kinds of premiums. And I laugh with my team about that. To me, if you give me a little certificate for something and it doesn't come with a Starbucks card, then it probably is not as valuable to me as it is to a high schooler. But apparently, this is a big motivation for others to participate, and especially for the younger crew to participate. So we're expanding that motivation to join and participate, which means the quality of the projects will go up and the availability of projects will go up to answer things like, are there great middle school language arts lessons or units that can be shared. And the last thing is, besides the badges, is a project planning tool. So it's going to be connected to the iPard Cycle. It will allow you to upload videos, documents, ask questions, submit them for peer review as students go through investigating, planning, acting, reflecting, and demonstrating. So keep your eyes on the GSN for both the badges, which we'll probably be releasing in the September-October timeframe, and for the project planning tool, which will be released the tail end of this calendar year, or maybe the first part of 2015 once we get it through the testing. So there's a question, Katie, I think maybe reach back out to Yvonne directly about joining their summer training, and NYLC is excited to be delivering a week of training down in Guilford in July, as well as next week at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction Student Institute, so Leadership Institute. So please feel free to reach back out to any of us to do that. As I look through the what your goals were, stuff about after school, I think the conversations about in class but also in clubs, the ACES program, student leadership vis-a-vis the high school programming in Mounds View, as well as the way that the middle school, high school participate with the elementary schools and taking leadership roles in Guilford for underserved students. And that's actually a specialty of ours at NYLC. We focus on the not prepared, not ready for college career population. And it's a great leveler, service learning is, because it brings personal knowledge and interest into the classroom in ways that maybe otherwise are not available to that underserved population. So it's one of those places where service learning, the research is clear. Service learning is among the best instructional methods to engage the disengaged, underserved. So I'm happy, again, reach out to me. I'm happy to share research about that, articles written, and give you some of our strategies about how we plan our programming to reach that community. If you have any further questions, please pop them in the box. Yvonne, I'm going to ask you if you've got a closing comment or two.
Great, thanks. So just looking at some of the information or questions that's been posted in the chat box. So all of the forms that we have, the teacher documentation form and the service learning approval form, those are actual forms that are on our GCS website, and I think that website link is also in the chat box. One of the things that we do, as Susanna mentioned, Noble Hour is strictly for tracking of the hours. It does not help with forms as far as, going through the forms and collecting the forms. We don't use that website to collect any of the forms. We only use it to strictly add in hours, and so we actually as a department collect all forms and go through them. And I think that as we progress through this summer, one of the questions about sharing the ELA connections, we'll do that, and we'll actually do some posting on the Generator School Network. So we'll make sure that you all kind of stay connected, or hopefully we can all stay connected so that you can identify and locate where those will be on the GSN. And one of the things I also noticed on here was about community partnerships, and so that's what I actually do in my particular job. Like, that is one of my focuses as the coordinator, is to work with our community partners. And so that is, that is a huge deal for us because, again, with us being such a large area, I work with, or have on my distribution list, about 170 community partners. And so in that, it's about really identifying specifically their needs and what they're seeking within their organization, and then trying to identify curriculum connections, like classes that have a particular focus. And so I try to build those connections and bridges. And one of the things that we'll do as well is a lot of the trainings that we've hosted throughout the school year and through our institutes for our teachers, a lot of the resources we've used come from the LIFT. NYLC has been a huge supporter of our work, and so we've used a lot of their free resources that are available on the GSN as well as the LIFT. But I will say that LIFT, I always go back to it. I had a little training this morning, and so again, I'm pulling some of those resources from there. So I really suggest, if you've not gone in there, to really dive into those resources. They're awesome. And then I think someone mentioned something about some of the Kathy Berger K books, and that one book that was mentioned on here, I can't recall the name, but it's the guide to service learning. It's like the ultimate guide to service learning or something like that. That is an awesome book as well. And so one of the documents that's in that particular book that we always use to help build curriculum connections is I think it's like a curriculum map, where you have like the issue in the center, and then all of the content areas are like webbed off of it. And so that's a great tool to use with for trainings for teachers as well, to really try to figure out how can I use my curriculum with this particular issue. So there are lots of great free resources out there, but as mentioned previously, if you have additional questions, please view our website, our Guilford County Schools website, because it does have a lot of our resources there. But also feel free to contact me too. And thank you, Susanna, for this opportunity. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for participating, and I'll see you on Monday. And
Yes.
Greg, if you want to wrap up.
Just real quick, you know, 90% of the kind of structural support and ideas and stuff that you guys are looking for really are in the GSN, so it's really worth your time, and is easily searchable. We use it all the time. One other resource that I just want to throw out there, though, when it comes to having those one-on-one conversations with teachers or those staff conversations with teachers, the work that's being done at the University of Kansas around instructional coaching is really valuable. That's really been valuable to me in the implementation side, plus what NYLC has helped us with as well. But the Center for Instructional Coaching at the University of Kansas in Lawrence is run by a guy named Jim Knight, and they have several books out there, and they are fantastic. And they're worth looking into as a piece that complements what NYLC is doing. Helps you with those tough conversations and teacher resistance.
That's it from us. Marcus is putting the last, it's Jim Knight. So it's Center for Instructional Coaching at the University of Kansas. It's on the chat box, and it's Jim Knight, K-N-I-G-H-T. Yep. But again, it's being posted in the chat box for you all to pick up. So thank you so very much for joining us today, and this recording will be sent out to you. The link for the recording will be sent out to you via an email. And look forward to the next series of GSN webinars, which we are designing right now and will be posted shortly. And I think we are wrapping up our school year with this webinar. So thanks for joining us for the 2013-14 last school year webinar from the GSN. So thanks so much, you all, and we're going to sign off.
Thanks.